There is no doubt that democracy is in decline. A system designed to be run by the people for the people has made them just numbers, and it goes hand in hand with capitalism, whereby economic growth is measured not on the welfare of the citizens, but on stock exchange metrics and profits of large corporations. To make things worse, in many countries of Europe, we have witnessed the insurgence of right-wing movements, something applauded by the likes of Vladimir Putin, who will exploit this situation to his advantage in destabilizing Europe by weaponizing the supply of energy and food to the continent. For a debate on this issue, we have today Michal O'Hurley, political analyst and editor of Diplomacy Ireland, and Frank Armstrong, editor of Cassandra Voices, a reputed Irish online magazine. Now, Michal, what is your take on this issue?
I think democracy is certainly in decline. I don't know if it's a long-term arc. We need to be careful about the growth of illiberal democracies because it's a fundamental challenge to the organizational structure and institutions we've put in place largely since World War II.
What are the terms of this decline? I mean, what do you see that it is not right?
I think the biggest thing starts with personal liberties. When we diminish the right of the free press, the right of the opposition to speak out, when we curtail people's fundamental liberties, it permeates through industry, through trade, through economics, through diplomacy, and the fundamental posture countries take towards each other. And it is a downward trend that makes the world more difficult. And I think one of the criticisms we'll have to deal with soon is the fact that there are so many fires across the planet right now that we tend to give over focus to one issue at a time. And by the time you tie one shoe, the other has become undone. We need to take a more global focus.
Frank, what do you have to say about the whole thing?
Well, I suppose it's a very complicated question. Democracy is I suppose it's a sort of a constitutional framework that's dependent on a lot of norms operating in a society. So when you arrive somewhere, for example, the US sort of attempt to democratize Iraq was certainly quite difficult and arguably unsuccessful. You need to have certain thresholds of development, I suppose, for democracy to occur in a developing world context. Whereas in the developed world, we have obviously the basis of high literacy, education levels, and so on that are sufficient for and I suppose material well-being that are sufficient for democracy to emerge. But we are, I suppose, we've witnessed in recent times the emergence of social media, which is I suppose corrupting arguably people's choices, where sort of advertising tricks are being used as never before, where it's argued that people aren't recognizing their own interests, where people are being turned against one another through sort of, I suppose, ethnic divisions, nationalism, the rise of, I suppose, arguably populism. But at the same time, we talk about things in terms of left and right, but I think that is a slightly, it can be a little bit simplistic because, for example, the right has in many ways appropriated some of the kind of left-wing ideas of you know, standing up for the little man against the large corporation. You know, ensure even in terms of housing or you know, material welfare. Obviously, this would be limited to a particular ethnic group, but those sort of left-right divisions aren't as apparent now, maybe, as they were in the past. I don't particularly blame Vladimir Putin for the decline in Western democracy. I see that as I see his influence, and undoubtedly he has contributed to the to certain political movements in Europe. But I see that more. I see the difficulty more arising out of the growing inequality really in Europe, and it's not just. I'm not coming from a sort of communist position. I'm coming from I suppose someone who believes in a mixed economy, where we've seen small businesses really being you know, having no chance at all against these corporate behemoths. You know, if you're a small you know, kitchen shop or something in a town, and IKEA moves in, you're going to be wiped out along with all the other shops that are in your catchment area. And I think that's quite problematic. And so I think we have a lot of work to do, and Europe should do a lot more to curb the monopolistic practices of large players, and to give more of opportunity for entrepreneurs, for small business people, for people who may not want to work in a corporation. And I think also we need to look at housing and how and the inability of young people to actually to find a property. And I think these are related problems. Because I think you're going to get a larger and growing constituency of people who have been shut out, who have a feeling they have no opportunity. There's a sense of resignation, particularly that's been heightened by the pandemic, and I think, you know, and social atomization. So I think we need to look at our own problems rather than just blaming Vladimir Putin, who's a Russian leader who, you know, who sees things in terms of more Russian security rather than global domination, I think. And he would.
Frank, you agree? Well, I'm not, in my introduction of an interaction, I was not blaming him for the situation. I was saying that he's capitalizing on the situation.
Oh, I think I'm the one who said that he's at fault. And if you want to talk about disparity, go 1 hour outside of Moscow and you will see the Russian population lives in conditions tantamount to Angkor Timur. If you want to talk about IKEA, talk about oligarchs. Russia under Putin has created the most unequal society on earth. There's nothing Europe can learn from Vladimir Putin.
No.
He himself has said that he wants to reabsorb what were the Soviet Union and the Warsaw Pact countries under Russia. He is an imperialist. He is on the drive. And if we do not stop Putin in Ukraine, we might as well fight him on our front doorsteps. That's not rhetoric. That is what he's promised. He's an honest man, just like Hitler. They told us what they were going to do. We fool ourselves into believing they're not realistic about it, and then they do it.
Is the United States honest? Fresh from ruining the Middle East, Europe is expected to follow the dictates of Washington again.
I'm not arguing Washington's position. I'm just saying we can learn nothing from Vladimir Putin, but death, destruction, rapine.
I didn't suggest we should learn something from Vladimir Putin for a moment. I'm not holding up his society as any kind of model. What I'm saying is that we need to address our own domestic problems, and that the threat that posed by Putin has, I think, been exaggerated and manipulated, I would argue, by the military-industrial complex. And I think that there's good evidence for that going back years.
Well, I would think you talk to the people in Abkhazia, Transnistria, in Donbass, the dead, the buried, the bombed, the civilians, and they will find that Putin has guaranteed his own reputation, and it hasn't needed any inflation from the West. Putin
Sure.
is
And
a
you
thug.
talk to 20% of the Ukrainian population is ethnic Russian, who have taken a diametrically different view to that. It's a complex situation that has been reduced to very, very simplistic kind of good and bad, good versus evil. Whereas actually there's a lot more to it. There are, it's a complex international dispute that has been going on since the end of the Soviet Union.
True, but murdering civilians, raping women, and murdering children is a binary issue of good and evil.
Putin spoke to Clinton in 2000 and said, "I want to join NATO." He was shut out. Russia was shut out. Was that a mistake? Could Putin have been somehow domesticated into Europe? Could we have actually resolved the Cold War properly? Should we have perpetuated NATO, as George Kennan certainly argued against the perpetuation of NATO? These are long. You see, when you look at a conflict, you look at short and long-term causes. We look at short-term causes. Sure, Vladimir Putin was certainly broke international law, invaded a country, has acted, absolutely as a war criminal. But when you look at a conflict, you need to go back and examine the origins, and the origins lie in a failure to accommodate Russia within Europe after the Cold War.
Well, I tell you that they had every opportunity to integrate into Europe. The problem was that Vladimir Putin believes in campaigns of murdering the opposition, quieting an independent media.
Okay, well, the US has an unenviable record around the world in doing such things, similar such things. We don't, and we rightly laud aspects of its democracy. Let's take a bit of a more global view, as you say, and assess the US and Russia and actually get back to some kind of international law, which was broken.
And I think Frank is right on this point. Frank is absolutely right on this point. Well, it does need to be a global view, and we can't solve our domestic problems with housing and homelessness and drug use in Ireland if it only means we're going to have a Russian jackboot on our doorsteps. We need to protect European security, democracy, and stop this illiberal trend.
Very well. Listen, on this, with these words, we just end our debate, which has been very interesting. And
thank you, Frank.
We have run out of time. Thank you very much. Now, perhaps we will remind the story of the war in Ukraine again on another occasion. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Frank.
Thank you, Frank.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.